Okay, I guess it's now 1500. Let's start with the class. Welcome everybody to this TRECI apprenticeship wormhole question and answer class. I see a lot of things. I see a lot of people recording, as common with Mumble. If we have too many people recording, it causes lag in the Mumble system. If 2 people could shut off their recording, that would be great. That should be good. Thank you. This class will be mostly about wormholes. You'll be able to ask your questions in lecture.E-UNI and we'll answer them. As needed, we'll explain about wormhole mechanics, but if you want an in-depth class about wormhole mechanics, it's better to check out the specified Wormhole 101 and 102 classes, and in this class you have the opportunity to ask very advanced questions about wormholes. Today we are joined by several apprenticeships, 7 apprenticeships, of which I am one. They will have been in the uni since I think the apprenticeship started in March. So some of us you might recognize if you're old enough. For now, I'll just open the lecture.E-UNI for questions. If you have any questions, please put them there. And we'll answer them.
So to start with, this is just a basic, fairly informal question and answer session about TRECI, about the apprenticeships, things that are new and things that are a bit different to how the uni runs. Just have a chat, really.
We got a question by Anzurel. How profitable is a wormhole and what would be ideal ship to fly? In this case, wormholes are extremely profitable. And there's never an ideal ship. Wormholes can make a lot of money. Here in TRECI we work with a sort of spreadsheet system where everything you do is logged into a spreadsheet. The Corp tax gets subtracted, and once in a week usually, when everything is run out to high-sec K-space to be sold, and everybody gets their payout from the Corp wallets. As for numbers, generally per payday, which is 1.5 weeks, I average about 1.5 billion, and I play a couple hours every evening, with the exception of Saturday, which the whole day. As for go ahead.
I was going to say, just to answer the question in a slightly different way, how profitable are wormholes? I would say a fair estimate is between 100 million and 150 million per hour of PVE. Sometimes it's much higher if you get lucky, but if you're making less than 100 million an hour, you're probably doing something a little bit below what a Class 5 wormhole normally should offer.
Yeah, it's important to note that you get out of wormholes what you put in. You don't have a constant flow of income. You might go for a week without doing anything. You have to live off your reserves, or you could find 30 sites in a perfect system with no danger, and you just run them and make 500 million in 2 hours or whatever.
And as for the best ship fly, it's a really hard question to answer. You fly armor, you fly shield, not in like the uni. You never fly kitchen sink. Only when you suddenly find somebody doing a sight in a Drake in your static, then you fly kitchen sink. You kill him and get out. For the rest, you always fly a specific doctrine, since if you don't, you'll get killed, either out-blobbed or just out-maneuvered by somebody who is flying a good doctrine. As for ships, very popular, I hate to say it, is the Drake, simply because it's possible to solo a specified radar and a specified magnetometric sight in C5s, which involves not killing the wave's trigger. And also very popular is the Legion, Armor Legion, T3 Legion, and really all the T3s are really popular.
Yeah, I think each of the T3s definitely has its own practical use.
It's wormholes. You need to. I think it might be my opinion. In wormholes, you need the broadest skill set you can get. You fly basically everything, but you fly nothing as well in the same time. One day you fly your PvP Legion, the other day you're sitting in your Drake doing a sight, and the other day you're sitting in your T1 battlecruiser gas harvesting, or jamming people on a wormhole. You'll never know.
A lot of the ships that you probably want to fly are usually battlecruiser or below size. We really don't do a lot of battleship type stuff, except for a trick that uses the mass of battleships to deliberately close a wormhole.
Also, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, sir.
I'll just bring to your attention, we managed to get one of our industry directors in the lecture.E-UNI chat channel as well. So if you have any questions about wormhole industry, you should be very able to answer those questions much better than I can, or I guess any of the other guys here.
I had another question.
Got
favorite class of wormhole for potential gank targets, and how easy is it to gank said target? I think I'm just going to answer that. I actually prefer some of the middle and lower class wormholes simply because a lot of level 5 wormholes, they're barren. There are no targets in there, period. Can I answer nullsec? Is that an acceptable answer?
I guess it's more about classes. Myself, I have to say C3s. C3s are easy to get into. There's quite a lot of random C3s, in my opinion. You get random C3s incoming or outcoming. There's a reasonable number of C5s with a C3 static, and C3s are populated. You can get somebody running, like last time we found a Abaddon running sites in an armor C3, and it's C3 is easy to find targets.
See, I'm going to go against all of you, and I'm going to say C5s are really good. If you know what you're doing and you assemble a decent fleet for the deliberate purpose of it, you can chain re-roll your static and try and find some optimal targets. For those of you guys that don't quite know the mechanics of it, every wormhole has a static that will always lead to a certain class of wormhole. The one that we live in is a C5 system that has a wormhole to a C5. And what we can do is we can crash that wormhole repeatedly and cycle it to find new systems, have a quick look in there. If there's targets, we can look at getting into a fight. If not, we close it again and try again. What we do a lot of the time is deliberately do this, and occasionally we can find capital ships running escalation sites in C5s. So that's usually at least 2 dreadnoughts, 2 carriers, and some T3s. I think it was 2 weeks into the apprenticeship, I got in on my first one of these, and we got about 10 billion worth in capital ships, and it was probably the most fun I've ever had in Eve. I burnt out the guns on my pathetic little Hurricane, and I just sat there webbing stuff. But it was great fun.
We have another question here. What does living in a wormhole actually involve? Living in a wormhole, I think the largest thing you have to adapt to compared to high sec, low sec, or actually any K-space is that you get what the wormholes give you. You have to adapt to where you live and adapt to what the environment does to you. If you want to go and do some PvE, you can't dock in a station and accept a mission. You have to scan down your static and scan down every site in there, look for good sites, and scan down the connecting wormholes to make sure you won't get ganked from another wormhole you didn't scan down. Also, they're a pain in the ass to live in.
Yeah, I think it took me a while to get used to. I don't know about everyone. First thing, obviously, you're not going to be living in a station. You're living in a POS. You're living out of one. And the biggest thing that took me a while to get used to is that you can't just go shopping when you want to. There are no market hubs. There's no trade hubs. So if I want to go buy a new ship, it may be a week before I can get to I can get out to known space and go buy that XYZ ship that I want to buy.
Okay, we have another question here. What is the minimum SPs does it usually take to get into a Wormhole Corp? Well, the answer to that question is it depends. It depends on what you have trained for, what skills you have, but generally, if I have to make a rough estimate, around 15 million SP should be okay-ish. Depends really on what you have trained in your supports, and if you have trained something like a mining ship, that's not required to at least go with us as the apprenticeship or something generally like that.
Yeah, I think I had 13 million when I went through my original interview for apprenticeship, and by the time I actually joined, I had 15 million. So I was right on the cusp, but I definitely think 15 is a good answer.
Yeah, I agree. Support skills are very important. You don't want to fly anything half-assed, but you get to a point where you've got all your support skills set, and then you can start expanding. You can train into a shield D3, you train into an armor D3, you train into a logistics ship, then you train into a recon, this, that. And it gets to a point where it's not progressing forwards, it's progressing to the side and getting into more ships rather than better ships.
I have to agree on that statement. Wormhole Space is more a jack of all trades and a master of one thing than a master of a couple of things and be able to fly only those things. Also in Wormhole Space, alts, most popular thing ever. To answer the question by Dark of Hartners, can you have more one character in TRECI? The answer is yes. Once you get to the junior rank, which I believe takes 4 months, you'll be able to have as much alts as you want. As an example, one of the people here in TRECI has 4 or 5 gas harvester alts?
It's 2 months first.
Is it about me or it?
But I believe...
I think Billy's got 4. One of them is a booster with the gas mining mind link.
I was in the impression he had over 100,000 accounts, specifically for gas mining. 4 sounds good.
Yeah, also really popular. For instance, I think most of the people in Turkey have a capital, but it's nearly always on an alt. It happens sometimes they train it on their main, but those characters are usually pretty long in Turkey, up to 2 years. But most of the younger people in Turkey have their capitals on their alts.
That's it. You don't need a capital ship to succeed in Trekkie, believe me. No,
not at all. It's just good to have.
So probably moving on to the next question. How do we solve logistical problems? Sometimes it's tough. It depends on the wormhole that you're in, especially the static. It's tough in a C5 because usually what you have to do is you have to re-roll your static to find a C5 C3. So you go from your C5 to a C5 to a C3, and usually with a C you'll be able to find either a low sec or a high sec static there. So it'll be C5 C5 C3 high sec, and that's how you get freighters in and out. Or you just luck out and have a high sec or a low sec wormhole from your home system or just from the chain of systems coming out of your static. We have a lot of documents in place, we've got shopping lists and that sort of thing to keep track of what people want. Some people run Corp stores where they bring in a bunch of stuff in advance, expecting that people will have their drakes blown up and will need a new drake, so they sell drakes. I suppose I think Bren would know more about that.
Yeah, I think in short, though, there is a type of wormhole that goes from high sec into class 5. It's called an M555, and they're beautiful. They don't happen to us, ever.
Well, maybe, but I just crashed them before you get to them.
Yeah, that could be, yes. But it usually involves a little bit of luck, and that's really one of the most important things. Is it involves a lot of luck getting out to a nice high-sec exit where we can move goods in and out easily and safely.
Also, when we reroll to a C5 with a C3 static, we cannot use freighters through C3 to case static since they don't have enough mass to hold a freighter. So for very large holes, we're dependent on finding a dynamic high sec or low sec in a C5. And once you get them, if it's close to a trade hub, we generally try to not crash them immediately with a freighter. For the high secs, the low secs, if it's like a low sec with the high sec gate in system, we often use them to bring in freighter stuff. Okay, let's see, we have another question here. Hopefully I don't skip anything. Is the income gained from living in a wormhole primarily PvE gained? Yes, the income from living in a wormhole is primarily from PvE. A lot of people in TRECI and a lot of wormhole people I know myself just PvE so they can PvP. Fit their ships expensively with faction stuff. Some people actually PvE for the money, but I don't know many people who actually do that.
In wormholes, you've got what would it be 4 different types of sites. You've got LADAR, radar, grav, and mag sites. Each of them have different opportunities for PvE. You can gas mine in LADARs. You can run combat sites in radars and magnetometric sites. And you can also do regular mining in grav sites. We tend to do a lot more of the non-grav sites because mining ships are pretty vulnerable. And each one of them, you've got some opportunities for solo PvE if there's not many people around, and there's also options for group PvE, which is obviously more lucrative. In particular, probably one of the biggest ones is capital escalations, where you use a mechanic in wormholes, where if you warp a certain number of a certain different type of capital ships to anomalies, mag sites, or radar sites, it spawns an additional number of sleeper battleships, which drop some really nice loot. And so you trick this system, and you bring in a certain type of ship that deals with it effectively, and you make lots of money.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a nice. I just have one thought on making money in PvP. Some corps do it differently, but we actually use our PvP income to fund our PvP losses. So that's why we only make it that way. There was a Noctis kill probably, what was it, a couple weeks ago? That would have, it was probably worth, I think we got 400 million off of it.
Yeah. The Noctis itself was $1 billion, but...
Yeah, and all of the stuff that we got pretty much funded our future and past losses from the Corp.
So basically in TRECI we have a ship reimbursement program which per different type of ship covers the whole cost, not your fittings, but the whole cost of the ship to a percentage. I believe the only thing I know out of my head is the 80% for logistic hulls, I believe. The rest I'll have to look up, but not very interesting. Okay, here's a question. How good is the PI in wormhole space? Well, wormhole space has a true sec of -1.0, so all the planets are extremely rich in resources, and in your home system you can convert the custom offices to your own custom offices, and you can set the tax very low. So it's possible to make a lot of money with PI in wormholes, which you wouldn't be able to do in low sec or high sec due to taxes.
Primarily what people do with in wormholes is make POS fuel, or at least POS fuel components, just to make the logistics of running all these POSs in the system a lot easier. We've got, what, like 8-10 POSs in the system, or something like that? It takes a lot of fuel.
Okay, here's a question. question. Oh, did Mol already answered? No. Question, how plentiful are minerals on average in wormholes? And is it possible to build your own ships in wormholes? Generally, the reason why we do not build our own ships in wormholes is because it requires too much mining. The graph belts, if they spawn in your home, they are quite massive. They are large. If you want to mine it out, you have to take 4 hulks, or maybe even 5, mine 24 hours per day, and you can barely empty the site before it despawns. Just to time. It lives for what, 3 or 4 days?
It's about 3 days.
Yeah.
But that's kind of loaded in the long run, though. Huge piles of minerals at certain times. And it is possible to build your own ships, but there's a refining issue. And so it's a little uncommon. You see, it's impossible to get a perfect refine from a player-owned station. And as a result, if you wanted to get a good refine, you'd have to take the minerals from wormhole space out to known space, refine them, bring them back and build them, and that's just pretty uncommon. At least with us. You also need special setups on the player-owned station to build just about everything. If you want to build ammo, you need this setup. If you want to build drones, you need this setup for your POS. If you want to build capital ships, you need this. So there are some companies that do a whole lot of production inside of their wormhole, but not a lot.
Okay.
Because of the logistics and the rate at which you make money per hour, it's just as easy, and it's a lot better as per hour to just run sites, make money, and buy ships and bring them in.
Yeah. And wormhole people are, I think, a little impatient, and building something like a carrier takes, 3 months?
Something like that.
Yeah. How many people are we going to take for the next apprenticeship? Arthurus Caldera asks. And I don't have an answer to that question, I'll be completely honest.
I think it was 8 from each time zone, or something like that. But we're pretty flexible, I think. We're not going to take more than we can handle, but we're certainly open to bringing in lots of prospective members if they're enthusiastic and interested in the idea.
Okay, here's another one. So what kind of professions are useful in a wormhole? Generally, you need a bit of everything. Like I explained before, you need to be able to hack for the radar sites, you need to be able to analyze for the magnetometric sites, you need to be able to salvage. If you want to run them sites, you need to be able to shoot stuff. If you want to mine, you need your mining hulk. You need a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I think at minimum, having 2 or more characters skilled for specific roles, sometimes that works, but it really varies. Like I think we discussed earlier, there's definitely a lot of people who have maybe a capital ship alt or a gas mining alt. But if you can't scan on a character, that's bad juju.
Okay, next question. Did you just answer this one? With the minimum skill you're looking for, are you looking ideally for a person to have that on a single character, or is there lenience for having 2 or more characters skilled for specific roles?
Yeah, that's kind of my answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the minimum for the apprenticeship, I'd say you might be able to get away with having scanning, CovOps type skills on an alt, but all the PvP type stuff has to be all in one.
Actually, I think we require all the minimum skills need to be on one character, since you are only allowed one character into TRECI in the apprenticeship. You won't be able to have any alts.
Yeah, scanning character is going to have to be your main. I think it'd be a little suicidal to not have scanning skills on a character personally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. Do people that participate in the apprenticeship program have a possibility to join TRECI afterwards? And if yes, will the probation period be the same? It is possible to join TRECI if you get an invitation from us after the apprenticeship program, but if you read our forum post, it clearly says that we have away from the recruitment tool that the apprenticeship was to more of a learning tool that we're to shape it into. So compared to the previous apprenticeships, the chance you'll get an invite has been lowered, and yes, the probation period will still be 4 months.
Keep in mind though that initially TRECI operated purely on apprenticeships for their recruitment. Now TRECI also does open recruitment, which has a slightly more stringent set of requirements before you're accepted into the Corp. Still then you've got a trial period before you get accepted as a full membership type sort of thing. But yes, there's the possibility of getting an invite after the apprenticeship. And even if you don't get the invite, there's open recruitment, which is still open.
Okay, here's a question. How would you describe the culture in TRECI? I'd say the culture in TRECI is extremely laid back. If you need to go and do something in real life, you have the opportunity to do so. It's a very open culture, in my opinion. It's just friendly. Everybody is friendly to everybody.
An important part of I suppose TRECI culture is the bottom up structure that everybody runs by. If someone wants to do something and no one really doesn't want to do it, then they'll do it, especially if they've got the numbers for it. So if you want to, take a fleet out and roam through the nullset connection, see if you can find a fight, so long as you've got enough people that say, yeah, I'm for that, then you'll go. There's no overarching boss saying, we are going to do this, for the vast majority of cases.
Okay, we have a pretty long question here. How do you get in and out of a wormhole? Well, by the use of wormholes. Their signatures you scan down. You can walk to them and you can jump through them. You can jump twice through a wormhole before you'll get a timer, and you will not be able to jump through the wormhole for 5 minutes. Second part of that question is, I said you need to have support skills. Which ones? You can find support skills we recommend in the apprenticeship thread on the Workwear forums. It's a pretty long list. And if you look on our recruitment post, which is not the apprenticeship post but another post by us, you can find the requirements of support skills we ask for open recruitment. Third question of him, can you solo mobs in there? It's possible in C1 and C2s, and I believe in C3s as well, but not always. You can kill them with one ship, and what type of ship to take on the mobs? In C1, C2s, generally any battle cruisers, and C3s, I think the Drake is extremely popular.
Yeah.
And one thing that may not have been covered in that is how to get into TRECI's wormhole for signing up for the apprenticeship. What will happen is if you are accepted into the apprenticeship, you'll become a member of TRECI, and in doing that, you'll get access to TRECI's Mapper, which is a web browser application that maps your position relative to the world. And it shows you all the connecting wormholes, and using that and corporation bookmarks, you can find your way to the entrance system and then to bookmark to each end of each wormhole, and then work your way back into the home system.
Just now you had a question about wormholes, how to get into wormholes. I'll just put a link in the lecture that you need to one of my classes about wormholes, and then it'll tell you quite a lot about them.
Perfect.
Thanks.
That's my kind of slideshow about wormholes.
Yeah. I had a question. There are no stations. How do you store your assets in between selling? Basically, in POSs, you can set up hangars with up to 7 different lockers in them, basically. And we actually use one of those lockers in one of our hangars specifically for stuff that is to be sold. And we have in our corp some people who do a very good job of getting things from our wormhole out to K-Space to sell it. It's really actually that simple. We store them in in a hangar.
I've just linked the module specifically that we store our crap in. That one's for modules, and
Okay, we have another question here. Is your wormhole pretty quiet, or do you often have other corps trying to throw you out? Well, generally we live in a C5. In a C5 wormhole, it's extremely hard to evict somebody since, especially us, we're not a small corp. We can field quite some numbers, and in wormhole space, especially wormhole space where you have access to wormholes where you can bring in capitals, you have the home field advantage of just having a lot more capitals in your system than the invaders can get into your home, with the exception of if they prepare for weeks and weeks and weeks and stealthily bring in dreadnoughts one at a time once they get a good connection.
yeah, it's important to know that wormholes, in C5 wormholes particularly, they only let you bring in one capital ship at a time, or two capital ships if it's a one-way trip. Then the hole closes behind you. So you can't blob in wormholes with capital ships. If you do want to have a fight with multiple capital ships, you have to bring them in two at a time and log them off in system, and then cycle your wormhole, find them again, bring in another two. So it's very hard to kick out a corporation once it's dug in. And with, 8 or 9 pulses in system, we're dug in like an Alabama tick.
I'm not sure what an Alabama tick is, but
It's a reference.
Okay. But basically, let's say you did want to use that method and bring in 2 capital ships at a time into our system. And let's say you found a nice system that has a C5 static, which means you could connect to our home. There's about 500 different Class 5 systems, and there's an even chance of you getting any one of those. And it takes about 10 minutes minimum to get a new system. So you've got a 1 in 500 chance of getting the right system entrance to the system you're looking for. It's going to take 10 minutes each time. It's not a quick process.
Believe us, we have a capital pilot that's stranded at the moment. He's been gone for, a month now?
Again.
Yeah, we're pushing on a month.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Okay, here's another one. How is comms handled in TRECI? Do you have involuntary comms chatter channels like LoSec Camp, or do you have chat channels for that, and somewhat organized fleet voice chat for ops? We have one main channel in our mumble we use for generally everything EVE related, and we have a couple of sub channels for things like playing Diablo 3 or doing something else, or just general chatter is also usually done in the EVE channel, just because it's the channel everybody is in.
Yeah, there's not going to be a lot of times, especially during especially when I play. There was 10 people on one day and I didn't know what to do. I actually was kind of scared.
This probably goes again in part to the culture of TRECI, but generally we all do the same thing, or at least just randomly chat, and then people do one thing at a time in the wormholes. Occasionally you get 2 things going on at once. You might have a PvP fleet and a PvE fleet at the same time. And if that happens, they'll split off and make their own channel, or one of us will. But for the most part, you can run sites and have chatter in the background. You don't necessarily need strict voice comms unless you're about to get into a big fight. And if it's a big fight, everybody's involved and paying attention anyway.
Okay, here's another one. Joining TRECI. Would I have to play solo a lot, or do fleet operations most of the time, like capital escalations? It depends in what time zone you play. I can only answer for the EU and the the end of AU time zone. Generally, fleet operations happen regularly. If you manage to get to them, there's generally 1 every week or 2 every week. Maybe even a little bit more. Just depends on what the wormholes give you. If you get black hole after black hole after black hole, there's not going to be a lot of PvEs. Black holes in very distance nerf your locking range and makes running sites very, very annoying.
Yeah, I was going to say, I play right around downtime. In fact, this is about the middle of the night for me. And I would say I do a pretty even mix of solo and fleet ops. I actually kind of had a habit for a while of going out and clearing out a few sites solo every day. And then that got boring.
Okay, you have a question. Can you get cap ships out of wormholes? Yes, like we explained before, you can get capital ships out of wormholes by the use of a low-sec or null-sec exit. High-sec you cannot exit through due to the limitations of no capitals in high-sec.
Should specify the fact that this is for C5 wormholes. You can't get them out of, what is it, C3s? Or no, C2s.
C4 to C1.
There we go, those ones.
Yeah, in fact, the only way you can have a capital ship in a class 1, 2, 3, or 4 wormhole is to build it in there. And that being said, you shouldn't, if you ever happen to go into a C1 or a C3 and you see a capital, that means it was built there. And it will never be able to leave there. If someone has a capital ship inside of a lower class wormhole, they are dug in. You probably will never get them out.
Okay, question. How often do you have to defend your home system? So far as I've been in TRECI, we never have to defend our home system in the way of getting our bosses shot at. We have had a couple of times that a fleet, most of the times from the generally a little bit larger corporations, entered our home system, but we just formed up a counter fleet and had a good fight on a wormhole or somewhere else. And that's really what a lot of EU-time TRECI people enjoy, PvP.
Yeah, I think Dimitria put it well in the term define defend. We haven't had anyone that's tried to come in and actually remove us forcefully from our home system. We have had some people that have come in and tried to run our sites, and some people have tried to come in and bait us into a fight that was probably foolish. But, yeah, PvP. Pew-pews.
Okay, here's another question. Can people access the POS storage if they're not a member of the corporation? No, you cannot. You can only access SMAs and corporate hangars arrays if you are part of the corporation they belong to. So even if you have the POS shield passwords or in the same alliance, you won't be able to access the SMAs and corporate hangar divisions. And it's actually possible to block access to certain divisions in the hangar due to the use of POS access rights, division access rights and POS.
Funny story about accessing a POS when you're not in the corporation. One of the Corp members, Opes, was randomly scanning around in the chain of wormholes, and he found a POS that didn't have a shield up, but it still had a ship maintenance array and a Corp hangar array, and they were online, and probably still had stuff in them. So he gets on comms and says, "Hey guys, do you want to ram raid a POS?" And obviously we're all up for it. We all jump into stealth bombers, walk to the place, and launch torps at these Corp hangar arrays. They explode, and we all eject from our stealth bombers. All people come in pods and get into, I think it was a rapier, a rock, a myrmidon, and steal a whole bunch of blueprints and nicked off back home. It was fun. Made a few $100 million that day. It's good.
Here's another question. How do you store personal assets? We have a couple of corporate hangar arrays spread around the bosses we have. Generally, in one of those corporate hangar arrays, you get a division to store your own stuff, and you'll have your own ship maintenance array, or you have to share the ship maintenance array in range of your corporate hangar array to store your ships.
How does the culture differ between the various E-UNI friendly wormhole corps, i.e. lead farmers, TRECI, adhocracy, future corps?
If I have to answer that, we're friendly, but shooty. We have no agreements at all, but if we find each other, we generally try and get some PvP out of each other. That's what we do.
I like the phrase friendly aggression pack. I thought that was a good one. There'll be good fights, and there have been on many occasions times when those corps that were listed will come together to fight a greater evil.
We all banded together a little while ago to take down a Against All Authorities POS, or several of them, in fact, that have been trying to set up in wormholes to farm capital escalations, and basically wormhole communities have united and said no. It's just one example of us being friendly, and I think it was a couple of weeks afterwards we got into a fight with them, so it swings both ways.
Here's another question. If you leave Wormhole to buy ships, items, etc., how do you find your way back to your home? I'll change that word. Wormholes do not die as soon as you jump through them, unless you jump so much ships through them that they collapse due to the mass limit has been exceeded. They generally live for 24 hours. There's a couple of wormholes who live for 48 hours, and there's a couple who live for 16 hours. It will just stay there until the 48 hours or 24 hours is over, then they'll disappear. You'll have more than enough time, usually, to buy your ships and get back to the same wormhole and get home.
Wormholes have mass and time limits. When a wormhole turns to EOL, end of natural lifetime, it's usually got about 4 to 6 hours left on it. There's some debate. But so long as a wormhole's not end of life, and so long as your entire chain from home through to HiSec or wherever you're going isn't end of lifetime, you can always spend at least 4 hours out doing stuff before you need to come back and double check to make sure you can spend more time outside.
Here's another question for those who can't meet the requirements for the next apprenticeship, which is, I believe, August 15th it starts, or ends, I don't know anymore. When can we expect the next one? I think the natural cycle in TRECI is apprenticeship, a couple of months of nothing, and then another apprenticeships. That's how we generally do it. I guess maybe December, a little bit later, January, around there.
From Emily Virpio, for the former apprentice guys, how long did it take you to get used to living full-time in a wormhole?
I think it depends per person. It took me about a week to get used to it. Just generally having bookmarks all over the place and having to remember which hangar is your own. It takes a while. I'm very happy that CCP nerfed the session change timer, otherwise it would have been a much more pain in the ass for me.
Yeah, I think for me it was somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks. It took only a few days to start getting used to having to type in passwords and things like that right as you log on so you don't bounce off of a force field. Now, honestly, I get a little nervous in HiSec because there's a lot of people, comparatively, and I have almost blown up myself a few times and gotten concorded because I saw someone. And my first thought was, easy kill.
Here's an easy question. How long does the apprenticeship last? The apprenticeship lasts for a month.
I don't know if this was a question or a comment, but Anemian said, why can someone who has so much wealth be so careless with their assets? That's because we have so much wealth. If we lose $2 billion, $2 billion carrier in a fight because we decided to jump in when we weren't sure whether we were going to win or lose or not, it doesn't bother us. We spend a day or so running PvE, and we can probably afford it again if we focus, which happened to us during the last apprenticeship. One of the Australian time zone guys got his Archon blown up, and we banded together and ratted for the better part of a day and reimbursed him.
Okay, it seems we dried up a little.
No.
Oh, I missed a couple.
Yeah, do you keep building Corp hangars? I might have skipped a few, but I just saw that. And how do you have Corp hangars and wormholes if... Oh, okay, that's the question. I think your question really involves... There's two words that we're using to describe a wormhole. And we're kind of using those words interchangeably, and that's the confusion I think you're having. We live in a Class 5 wormhole, which is basically a system just like any other, like Aldrat or Lustrafik. We also go through wormholes, which in that case, a wormhole is being used kind of the equivalent to a Stargate that disappears and then respawns somewhere else. So our corporate hangars don't keep disappearing. They're staying in our wormhole, like Aldrat. But in order to get to another wormhole, we have to go through a wormhole. It's kind of like one of those exhibit memes.
Yeah, we're not wormhole nomads. We don't pack up and move all the time. Every wormhole system has a locust number. It's the equivalent of the system name. Starts with a J and then has 6 numbers, so J1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 could be a given wormhole. We live in J1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not going to say the actual name for OPSEC, but we live in the system, and we get wormholes that go out. We go out, we do stuff, we come back, we log off. I think we've lived there for just shy of a year now, I think it was, since the Corp moved, but this was before I came to the Corp. So I'm not entirely sure when we moved up from C4 sites, from C4 wormhole, sorry. Be interesting to see if a nomadic wormhole Corp could function.
CCP, when they originally developed wormholes, did not expect people to live there full time. So even if a nomadic wormhole corp wouldn't function, CCP certainly thought it would.
Okay, here's another one. How valuable is a carrier pilot to a wormhole corp? Having a carrier pilot is good. So simply is it. It's good to have as a support in case you're fighting on the wormhole, which is exiting from your home into another system, and they bring in a capital. You can bring in a capital of your own, which is commonly called, you just keep a bubble up around the wormhole, so they can't land the capital on the wormhole on 0 and crash the wormhole behind you. And you'll be able to jump in your capital, provide rep support, and get the fleet and the capital out, and the wormhole will close behind the capital, if you're in a C5 at least. So, you can also run PvE capital escalations with your carrier, and you need a carrier to run the PvE capital escalations, or you have to go very cheeky and use dreadnoughts in a very complicated way, which takes a lot of time explaining. Here's another questions. Any recommendations on the COFOPS frigate race? No. All the COFOPS are just as good as the others. There's no really exceptional COFOPS frigate.
I think the cheetahs look the ugliest and they're therefore the best.
Yeah, there's nothing special about any particular COFOPS frigate over the other. I think the only slight difference is how many kill mail whoring modules you can fit on it. I think I personally favour the Anathema because it lets me fit a point and a target painter, but honestly that's the only difference I can find. So long as you can put a probe launcher, a COFOPS cloak, and a micro warp drive on it, you're all good.
Here's another question. Just how much ISK do you guys turn over on average a day? The answer to it is simple. It's between 0 and 1 billion, or 2 billion, or 3 billion. It depends on what wormhole you get, what spawns in your home. If we get an instrumental, which is the highest gas site there is in home, an instrumental holds about 2.5 billion ISK of gas. But if you get something like a token site, that holds 1 million of gas in ISK. So, yeah, it depends on what the wormholes give you. If we run an armor fleet or shield fleet to run PvE sites in our static system, which is not our home, but the system our current wormhole is connecting to, we can generally run 1 billion for 2 or 3 hours.
I just had a quick look at our payday sheet, which logs how much money we've all made over time, and it looks like on the average payday, which is usually a week or a week and a half, the Corp as a total nets between 8 and 26 billion a week, divided by however many people were active during that week. So it can be a lot, it can be nothing.
Okay, here's
Actually,
Go ahead.
just quickly butt in and say that the week that we got 29 billion was actually during our apprenticeship. Everybody was very enthusiastic to do capital escalations once they learnt what they were.
Okay, another question. What environment effect is your home system under? Our home system is not under any environmental effect. We just don't have one.
I want to answer this thing about limited resources in Wormhole, because it's an interesting question. There is an unlimited supply of resources in wormholes, although given certain circumstances, a single wormhole may run out of resources. It's kind of convoluted and confusing to explain how sites spawn in wormholes. Can we go into exactly how sites spawn in wormholes? Is that acceptable?
Oh, they just spawn at downtime.
Well, no, but exactly the number of sites in a constellation and that whole deal?
Oh, that's a bit heavy.
Yeah, I'm concerned it's a bit heavy, but in short, there are constellations in Wormhole. They aren't connected, but they are constellations. And let's just say that theoretically you have 10 wormholes in a constellation. At all times, there are going to be a certain number of sites in that constellation. So if you go through all of your sites and burn them out, but no one else in that constellation is doing any sites, they will eventually all end up in the other sites, in the other systems in your constellation. So you could run out in one wormhole. It's unlikely, though.
In short, if you despawn a site, it'll respawn somewhere else. So wormhole space won't run out of stuff to do. If a particular system runs out of stuff to do, you just cycle your static wormhole, find a new chain, find more stuff to do.
Here's another question. Do you do PI in the wormhole to keep your bosses running? I believe you've answered before, but yes, we use PI to create boss fuel. Okay, another question. What are the differences between joining TRECI through the apprenticeships and by application? By application, you go in and you're meant there to stay. With the apprenticeship, you can try out wormholes, see if it fits by you, see if the TRECI Corp atmosphere and how TRECI operates fits with you, and it will be a much better experience for you if you don't fit with it, or if you do fit with it, then just going in and pretty much plan to stay there for a very long while. Another question, which are more preferred, supercarrier or carrier? Supercapitals are not able to be built or jumped into any wormhole systems, so you're limited to a carrier.
I would still prefer a supercarrier over a regular carrier, if I had the option.
Here's another question. Is there any usable mods, like sleeper officer mods, or mods drop you could fit to your ship? No. Sleepers do not drop any mods. They drop blue loot, which is essentially a form of tags which you can sell to NPC buy orders. And if you salvage them, you get loot. The salvage you can use to build T3s and their subsystems. Okay, here's another one. What is the role of dreadnoughts in Wormhole Corp's PvE and PvP? Generally, dreadnoughts in PvP are used to shoot bosses. In PvE, they are used to shoot down the sleeper battleships in siege mode. If a dreadnought gets a good hit on a sleeper battleship, it can do a very large amount of damage. and clear them very quickly.
They're also used heavily in past sieges.
Here's another long question. Looking towards the future, does TRECI have interest or means to relocate into a C6 should the right system present itself, or something a C6 that makes permanent residence not viable, attractive? Well, there's two reasons, I guess, two of the main reasons why we won't move into a C6 is first off the logistics. Moving an entire corp to another system is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. You have to get either several wormholes to that system, or you're going to have to abandon a lot of your stuff in your old system. Secondly, there's a lot of corps out there who are not so friendly with us. RNK are probably the largest one, who have a C6 static, and there's only 100 C6 wormholes. So if you reroll your C6 static, there's a pretty large chance you're going to hit the system you want to hit if it's a C6. So getting invaded and getting kicked out of a C6 wormhole is much easier for other people to do than if you are living in a C5 wormhole.
Yeah, there's 109 exactly Class 6 wormhole systems, and what would you say about 6 major Class 6 wormhole corps?
Yeah.
If that many?
Something like that.
Yeah, and of those 6, Aperture Harmonics comes up in my head on the list. Starbridge, are they a C6? They're all pretty mean groups of people that bring in some serious firepower on a regular basis. And yeah, exactly what Tim Denor said. It's a pain to get up and moving.
Another thing is that the mass limits on C6 to C6 wormholes and another C6 wormholes are a lot bigger than C5 ones, which allow for quite significantly larger blobs, which are, we think at least, are a lot less fun. Multiple capital ships with a large amount of subcap support it just comes down to a game of numbers rather than a game of tactics.
Yeah, I think that I speak for a lot of people who live in wormholes that if I wanted to be part of very large fleets, I would have joined a nullsec alliance.
Here's another question. We apparently have mostly positive sex status. Is this standard in TRECI, or do we grind it up to keep it positive, or do we avoid PvP conduct? The answer to the question is pretty simple. We fight mostly in wormhole space. In wormhole space you won't get negative sex status, and sometimes we go out and ratting, and no, we do not avoid combat in low sec at all. As for instance, recently I ganked a mining fleet in the low sec belt with a 7-point Corp, which is a lot of fun.
We're also not averse to high sec PvP as well. I think it was Tyr. I think he's in Channel but not in Mumble. Spent a good deal of time ganking stuff in the Burnjeter event and did a nice job of his sec status.
Oh yeah. I'll be honest, I do avoid PvP in low sec to a certain level, not because I really care about my sec status, but because I don't completely understand all the mechanics, and I don't like looking like an idiot because gate guns blew me up because I did something foolish.
This is a good point. Also, a lot of us being in T3s and a lot of us having Logi 5 during the heyday of incursions that have now passed, sadly. We did a lot of incursions. Myself, Yummy Tears, Tendenor, who else can I think of right off the top of my head? Not a lot of us were very involved in incursions with A, the uni, and B, public and private incursion fleets like Bliss Fleet and so on. So we got some pretty good sec status bumps from that sort of stuff.
Okay, here's another one. You mentioned scanning skills are essential. Which skills should we focus on besides cartographic and astrometrics? I believe for the apprenticeships you have to scanner support skills at 3, which means astrometric range finding, astrometric pinpointing, and astrometric acquisition has to be at 3. The higher the better, and I have to disagree with Kavina on astrometric acquisition being less important. I think it's actually equal important, as even more important than the rest. The lower amount of time your probes are within D-scan range of the target you're trying to scan down, the better chance you have of getting him, pointing him before he warps off due to spamming D-scan. And trust me, spamming D-scan is very common.
For PvE, and just generally doing things in wormholes, you need to scan a lot. So you need at least astrometrics 4, and then range finding and pinpointing at 3. Acquisition, not so important for just moving around, finding wormholes, finding sites, and so on. But if you're doing combat probing, you want everything as high as you can get it. I deliberately trained up a Corp alt that has perfect skills, and I'm going to get it into a set of virtue implants to boost my scanning skills so that I can scan really quickly and get fights with that.
Here's another question. There are presumably quite a bit of housekeeping tasks that need to go on to make things happen. How do you split tasks like that and make sure they happen? Well, there's not a lot of housekeeping tasks. There's the standards required to probe. And yeah, for the rest, the housekeeping task is actually finishing up after PvE, salvaging, opening cans, etc. And generally those tasks either get volunteered or, yeah, actually somebody usually just grabs the Noctis and salvages it. It's not that much work to do.
There's a fair bit of logistical housekeeping in terms of getting things in, getting things out, organising paydays and so on, but Mal usually does that and we sort of leave that to him. I've got a question. Out of your number, what is the % of people who are dedicated to production and industry? Al would know more about that. Okay, so he says we've got about 3 people who each have their own small army of alts for doing that sort of stuff. Usually it involves freighters and reverse engineering, that sort of stuff is done in-house. So we've got another question. Why do Rooks and Kings not like you? I'm not entirely sure. I haven't had that much interaction with them. But just from our experience, we've had some fights and they like to blow us up. And I don't know, maybe we just get along with Two-Step better than we get along with Mesa. There may be some dodgy history or something or other, but I have no idea. That would be old history. Another question, and this is a good one actually. While the uni focuses mostly on blobs, what sort of fleet types and tactics do you guys mostly and commonly deploy? So we've got several, I suppose, doctrines that we use for different circumstances. Usually, if we're just running a quick gank, like jump in, kill something, jump out, we don't really care. Sometimes we even don't care about what type of tank you use, whether it's shield or armor, you just jump in and kill things. If you're going for a specific roam, it'll usually be, if it's in nullsec, it'd be like a kitey shield kind of thing, usually tornadoes, hurricanes, drakes, things that are fast, agile, and good damage projection. Tier 3 battle cruisers are good for that. Usually in wormholes, if it's an organized sort of straight up fight, it's usually armor ships with gun. Most of the PvP ships we use are Tech 2 or Tech 3 cruisers, simply because of A, the mass that you can pass through a wormhole, B, the small signature size and speed, and C, the Tech 2 resist profiles that you can get. So things like armor hacks, Tech 3 cruisers, heavy interdictors, those sorts of things are really good for wormhole PvP. Another type of fleet doctrine that we use involves capital combat, and that's usually one capital ship supported by bargorns and again armored Tech 3 cruisers and so on and so forth. That's usually if we're chain re-rolling to try and find a fight with capital ships, and we need some heavier reps if we're going up against dreadnoughts and that sort of thing. Sometimes we do special things with stealth bombers or whatnot, but those are the main types of fights that we get. Also, the size of fleets is quite significantly smaller than uni fleets. I think we class 30 as a really big blob. Usually we get in fights of between 2 people and 10 people. It's usually the average size that you can expect. So every ship counts, in fact, which is another part of the reason why we pimp our ships a lot, because you can only bring one ship to a fight. Usually, you can't just reship quickly, and if you get potted, you can't come back at all. So we tend to use faction modules and so on, and make it count for what we bring to a fight. Rather, have I missed anything?
I actually DC'd, so I missed part of the question. But everything that you did say, I completely agree with. I basically, there's kind of a phrase that is called punching above your weight class, which basically means bring the most oomph for how much your ship weighs. And that's a philosophy I think we abide by pretty heavily.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we have another question from Fit and Collar. What about support skills like hacking, archaeology, and salvaging? Is there a minimal level for those? The mini professions, so things like salvaging, archaeology, and hacking, I think, are the 3. I might be missing one. You probably want to have them to about 3, maybe 4 for salvaging.
Yeah, that's exactly
what you can do. Yep. Some of the things in wormholes that you need to salvage or hack are above that level for access, but you use specially rigged ships. We use Vigils. Some corps use Blackbirds because you can fit lots of mid-slots, but it's minor detail. And they rig them to give you extra levels in that so that you don't have to spend ages training that. You can spend more time diverting to PvP skills and so on. One of the ones that you will want to have to 5 is gas cloud harvesting, because the difference between 4 Tech 1 gas cloud harvesters and 5 Tech 2 cloud harvesters is more than doubling your income from that. So it's probably one of the best ISK per hour increases in the game in terms of gas harvesting C320, which is the most valuable gas, and I think you make 280 million ISK per hour.
I believe it was close to 500, but maybe market prices have dropped.
They have dropped a bit, but it varies on how much time is spent transporting, but about 380.
Something like that anyway. Oh, that might be minus corp tax or whatever.
Long story short, if you have gas mining to 5 and you get in the right situation, you will make so much money, it should be a crime.
Yeah.
It's also really boring gas mining. No one does it because it's exciting.
Yeah. You don't gas mine for the thrill of it.
Not so much. What's the next question?
We've got a pretty good one. How much of your stuff is shared? You mentioned the Noctis. You make it sound like it was Corp owned versus owned by each person. Yes, we have, I think it's like 5 Noctises, and they're all called Sally. But we have a central ship hangar that has several types of ships. Noctises are probably the main one that we share. We also share one of each type of battleship to use for wormhole closing, because we generally otherwise don't use them that much. We share Falcons, we share heavy interdictors, because people can't really be bothered to buy their own because they're expensive and they don't get used very much. We share Guardians. Go ahead.
Yeah, and don't forget the Force Recons, of course. We have a special set of Force Recons you use for very specialized situations. Sometimes you get in those situations where you need a specialized ship with some sort of crazy fit you only find in wormhole space. And generally those types of fits you will have in our Corp hangar. Most of the people won't have it themselves. Of course, there is exceptions.
Yes. One example is Covop's trap interceptors. They're fitted with sensor boosters and I think it's signal amplifiers and long points and this, that, and the other, and no tank whatsoever. And they're designed to catch scouts coming through wormholes, and they work pretty well. But in any other situation, they just die horribly.
Here's another question. Do you make enough ISK to pay with all your accounts with Plex? Yes, I do. I have 2 accounts myself. I generally make enough ISK to pay them myself, but I choose to pay one with real life money and one with Plex. And it depends on the amount of time you play. It just depends. Some people can make a lot more money than I can with playing a couple of hours every evening.
Long, uncomfortable silence.
Oh, yeah, I was using Corp chat.
I'll agree with that one. And I do make enough money that I could easily Plex my account and my alt account and my significant other's account. But she pays for her own account, and I have no problem paying for my account, so I Plex one of them.
Here's another one. Why did you change the apprenticeship to be less recruitment focused? Is it partially because the needed SP/versatility is moving upwards? No, not really. It's just that the open recruitment has been an extreme blast. We got a set of extremely good people from it, and not right now Diablo 3 is a pain in the ass for us, but if people stop playing Diablo 3, the numbers can get pretty high. Just before Diablo 3 was released, we often had double the numbers in Corp than we had during the start of my apprenticeships a couple of months ago. Here's another one. Is the refitting ability of the hangar of the Orca much used in wormholes? Not really. We use ship maintenance arrays to refit your ships, and logging an Orca takes a long while, and if there's more than 10 people around the Orca, the ship maintenance refitting ability is blocked by just being too much people around the Orca.
That said, every POS mechanic follows that same method, so we do make a big use of that mechanic, just not from an Orca. Every time you change ships or change modules on a ship, you do it like you would at an Orca, but you use a ship maintenance array or a ship hangar, or sometimes a carrier, but that's usually a bit specialized if we're going into a fight or something like that.
Next question. Do work rolls get used at all? Yes. We have a work roll. I believe the production team has one. We use it to compact our ore to ship out to high sec, especially the high-end ABC ores are quite massive in size if you don't compress them, and you only have so much space in your freighter going out. So we use it, and the Wormhole has a special thing, is that it's able to field capital reps, but it doesn't count as a capital wave escalation ship. So you can use a Wormhole as a sort of opener capital escalation ship to clear out the small stuff which is not battleships or the trigger, and using the weapons of the Wormhole, which are capital and rep quite a lot, without triggering the additional battleships.
Yeah, they're a sneaky way to shoehorn capital reps onto the field without suddenly having to deal with an extra 6 battleships. Goes into a lot of the more advanced wormhole mechanics, and that's probably beyond the scope of this class. We finally caught up with the question flow.
Yay.
Yay.
Now we missed the arc in our static.
Yeah, I didn't even see that. Oops.
That's pretty... I saw it, but I couldn't fly the Diphtheria yet, so I have to wait a couple of days.
For those of you listening at home, we just almost had a fight with a Archon that was trying to close the wormhole connecting to our home system, I think. Is that what it was?
No, nullsec.
Ah, okay. That then.
Okay, here's another question. What's your favorite wormhole activity? For me, PvP. PvP is a lot of fun. In wormhole PvP, you get a sort of PvP you see nowhere. In wormhole PvP, everybody counts double. You fit your faction ship to count double, and the little difference of you flying upwards or downwards can mean the difference of you getting one-shotted or winning the fight. It really depends on player skill, on experience with PvP, and one of the things I never see, but in wormhole space, is that the neuting is like a very, very important part of wormhole PvP.
I'm actually going to go a completely different route. I'm going to say actually one of my favorite activities in wormholes is basically going down the pipe. And what that basically is just constantly scanning until you get a very long chain of wormholes. I don't know why I find it exciting. I know that it's boring, but I really enjoy doing it. Maybe I just love geometry, because that's what scanning is geometry.
I agree with Ratha in the fact that scanning can sometimes be sort of quite therapeutic and sort of almost a bit of a ritual, but I definitely have to say my absolute favourite thing in wormholes, as I mentioned before, was chain re-rolling for capital ship combat. It's just unlike anything that you see anywhere else, and I think honestly this is how EVE should be played. The fact that you have certain force multipliers, you've got a limited amount of things you can bring in. It involves tactics, it involves ship fittings and doctrines from beforehand, but also things that you do on the field during the fight that also turn the battle. It's not who has a bigger corp or who has more friends that they can bat phone. So I think it's a really good thing, and you've got these different levels of subcaps. You've got capacitor warfare, which adds an entire extra level to how you approach a fight and how you deal with a fight. And you've got the capital ships that provide just the value of winning a fight, because from them can be hundreds of millions of ISK. And it also provides the big heavy hitting capability that really lets you punch above your weight, as the saying goes in wormholes.
Okay, here's another question. If I'm very new to EVE in general, should I be staying away from W space? If you're very, very new, so I assume a couple of, maybe a week or two, yes, I would say stay away from wormholes. In wormholes there's no local, no warning, and for all you know, there's a cloaky sitting right next to you about to point you. That's wormhole paranoia. And it can be extremely dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. You can get yourself locked out, you can get yourself stuck, and getting out of somewhere when you're stuck and you don't have probes, it's either kill yourself or get killed.
See, I'm going to disagree with that, with his answer for a little bit. I've actually talked to people that have gone in, granted not by themselves in the wormholes after playing for 2 weeks. They got by, they just sent because they had gotten the skills. They brought in a Tech 1 scanning frigate and scanned down for other people. Should they have died? Probably. Did they? Sometime. But they had a lot of fun. And for 2 weeks into the game, and they had a good time, that's what this game is about, is having a good time. So the answer probably is, it depends.
No, seems we run out of questions again.
Doesn't everything in EVE just depend? Isn't that how it is? What's the best fit ever? It depends.
What's the best ship for such a role? It depends. Got a question, another ship-related question. Which T3 shield or armor tank? This is actually something that we've been discussing as a Corp. Up until recently, we used Tengus as the real remote rep workhorse for PvE. We still do that to a degree now, but we're trying to shift the focus away from that towards armor PvE. One of the really good things about this is the fact that armor PvE ships are almost identical to armor PvP ships, and an armor PvE fleet is a couple of heavy interdictors away from a fully fledged armor PvP fleet. Case in point was about a month and a half ago, we had a fleet out in, I think it was Alpha, Double Alpha maybe, our second, so our static and then the static of that system out running sites, and someone else was scanning around in a second chain that was incoming into our home system. They had reports of a small fleet of Tech 2 cruisers sitting on the hull and about to jump in. They ganked one of our AFK, one of our Corp members that wasn't on Mumble. He lost I think it was a retriever or something like that. He was just doing some random mining. But within about 45 seconds, we were out of the site and on the return wormhole and ready to engage them. We got a heavy interdictor in there and bubbled up the hole, the return wormhole, and basically took hull control and fought their fleet back. We also stranded their scout in system and started closing on them, and we ransomed him for about 100 mil to get his ship home. So that's why we've been trying to swap to armor PvE ships, because it lets you swap over if a fight happens.
And to answer the question, we use Legions and Proteuses for armor, and we use Tengus and Lokis for shield.
No, we use Lokis for armor as well.
Yeah, but...
Okay, armor Loki's acceptable.
Armor Lokis make great tackle boats with their long-range webs.
Yeah. Lokis are good at everything. You know, because Mimitar is good at everything. I'm not biased.
Here's another one. Is a main and an alt enough to move into a C1 and a C3? I'd say yes. If you keep out eyes with proper scouting, you can move into a C1, C3. But it will be hard if you don't set up a boss or some sort of base. If you set up a small boss, expect to be a target of a round of Is It Stranded. A lot of low-class, slightly larger corps alliances find it fun, don't know why, to shoot at small bosses to see if it's stranded or just see if they can get money or ransom outside of the owner of the boss. Medium bosses don't get hit as often, but they still do. And if you set down a large boss, if you get sieged, that's something expensive to lose.
I've got a question from Liam. Do you make use of drones a lot? We don't have that many drone boats, admittedly, apart from carriers. However, they're usually triage carriers, and so they don't use drones too much. Not to say that we shun drone boats, but it just so happens that a lot of our members don't have drone boats. And also, if you look at drone boats, there's often a turret-based equivalent. So if you're in the Ishtar, you can also use the Demos, which is just happens to be preferred because of the DPS output. And same with the Proteus, the blaster option is better than the drone option. And we generally avoid using battleships in general, so there's not much use of the Dominics.
I have to add to this is that smart bombs and ECM drones are very common in Wormhole space. Generally all these support ships, so ECM Tengus, carriers themselves, fit smart bombs and actively go around your fleet and try to smart bomb off enemy drones. So drones do get killed quite often in real size engagements, so that's around 15 people versus 15 people. We also...
Admittedly,
go ahead.
I was going to say, admittedly, the most frequent users of combat drones in our Corp is probably logistics ships for kill mail whoring. That's about it, apart from ECM drones.
I saw this question, I just really want to answer this. I was always in the impression that the Battle Badger was the best fit end up, which nicely connects over to, is the change away from SHIELD because of our corporate-wide hate of Caldari boats? No, it is because of our corporate-wide hate of Battle Badgers, which happen to be Caldari boats. So there's two questions in one right there.
Okay.
A lot of people in...
Go ahead.
A lot of people in the Corp do hate Caldari boats, but they certainly have their uses. If you're trying to do stuff solo and you can't fly a Drake, you're going to have a bad time. Same with the Falcon. It's very useful for certain PvE applications as well as PvP. And the Drake, again, with good damage projection for being a cheap ship that's easy to get into. It's used a lot in skirmishing in nullsec. It's just how it is.
Yeah, I think I did the math one week and I spent almost a third of my time in a Drake. For good, bad, or otherwise.
Another question here, following up with a ship-related question. Any preference for close-range or long-range weapons? Generally, we fit our Galente ships with blasters. In Wormhole space, sniping doesn't really happen. No, it doesn't. You need to get close, point the dude, and sniping on Wormholes is not so smart since the people can just jump out. They can just jump out. There's no aggression on Wormholes, so if they shoot you, they can always jump at any moment. But they'll still be restricted if they jump through the same wormhole twice within a small amount of time. They'll get a timer of 5 minutes where they won't be able to jump. But generally, sniper boats are not used. I think the largest range ships we use is in armor PvP is probably the Zealots. We have a couple of Zealots fit to take out Falcons and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the vast majority of fights that happen in wormhole space happen on something, whether it's a celestial beacon that we've scanned down, whether it's a wormhole, whether it's at the sun at 0. It's usually on top of something and at knife range, especially with, like, if we're involving capital ships. You want to A, get under the guns of dreadnoughts, and B, get as close as you can to a carrier to be in optimal range anyway.
Here's another question. How much does a large boss cost per month? Or our industry guy answers 300 to 400 mil a month, but I recently ran the numbers, and with the latest increase in boss fuel prices, they went up by 3k a unit, I believe. It's close to 600 million now.
Now, that answer is assuming an Amar pass.
Yeah.
And Amar ice blocks have gone up a lot compared to other types of ice block. Is that a result of market speculation or someone manipulating? I don't know, but theirs have been rising in comparison to other ice blocks. So any of the economists who are in the room, maybe you can have some answers, but I surely don't.
Here's another question, which is actually quite a good question. Why do you use legions and Proteuses a lot? Would covered ships be better? I'm assuming you're asking about covered ships, T3s. We don't use them is that their DPS is terrible, and you cannot refit your subsystem. To go to a station to refit your subsystem. So, for instance, I have a separate Tengu I use for covert ops and scanning, and I have a Legion which I use for PvP as a T3. My covert ops Tengu puts out an amazing 150 DPS, and if you put on a offensive subsystem without the cloak, I go up to 450 DPS. So that's a very large difference.
Another reason for this is the fact that because wormholes take so much effort to scan down the next system, you rarely have chains going for more than, say, 5 systems in a row. And as such, you're never very far from your home base. So you can, hide a non-cloaky PvP fleet just in the next system over, and chances are they haven't found that system yet. Or you can just have them at home and go in, find your possible targets, and then bring in your PvP fleet. You don't have to sacrifice to bring in something cloaky and then get the drop on them because of the lack of local in wormholes. The only way you can know if someone else is in system about to gank you is if they show up on D-scan or if they are physically on grid with you shooting at you.
A little bit more about T3s, though, and subsystems and changing them out. A lot of people, even in known space, will have multiple different T3s of the same type. And that's because even though if you're in a station, you can change out subsystems, you can't really change out your rigs. And Tech 3s are nice enough that it's worth getting Tech 2 rigs in certain cases. So I have a Tengu that is a shield missile Tengu, and another Tengu that happens to be an armor-tanked ECM Tengu. Completely different sets of rigs, and just replacing those rigs every time I wanted to reconfigure my Tengu would really not be cost-effective.
Here's another question. There's a Kaldar pilot who wants to get into armor ships. Is there a preferred race to cross into? I think it depends on personal opinion, but for TRECI I would say Amarr. Amarr ships are used a lot in TRECI. Legion, Zealot, Guardians are very popular for what we do. Also, the Revelation and the Archon are the best capitals to use.
I think other people might have some words to say about the Moros with regard to the best dreadnought, but yeah, a lot of what Tenor said there was good. I actually went exactly through this. I came into TRECI being able to fly a Drake, and that was about it. And I almost was able to fly a Tengu. And once I sorted that out, I really had to think about what I wanted to train into. I'd agree with Tenor saying that Amarr is probably the best one, because what you have is you train Amarr Cruiser 5, and if you've flown a Basilisk, that means you could fly a Guardian, especially if you're Logi 5, which is brilliant. Your missile supports will be good for a Sacrilege while you train up lasers, and then once you get that, you can get into a Zealot. Also, training up Amarr also lets you get into a Balgorn, which is a very key in Wormhole PvP because it's one of the best ships for capping out enemy carriers and dreadnoughts. It also, as Tendinor said, lets you get into Amarr capital ships as well. That said, if people wanted to train into Galenti or Minmatar, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's useful ships in all of the races. Caldari seem to be a little bit different because all of their ships are tend to be have their best uses in PvE, like the Drake, the Falcon, the Scorpion, the Tengu for ECM, and that sort of thing. Oh, sorry, the site ranking Tengu, not the ECM score, Tengu.
Here's another question. Do Galente ships get much love in Wormholes?
As a general whole, I would say no, but a few of them shine so much. The Proteus being the biggest example. But yeah, a lot of Galente ships are not ideal.
Yeah, I have to agree on that. If I look on my experience in TRECI from the apprenticeship, I only see the Proteus, the Morals, and maybe sometimes the Galente Heavy Hack and Galente Hick, but that's about it. You'd never see, maybe the Myrmidon, some people use the Myrmidon, but for the rest of the Galente ships, you never see them.
I've seen a Myrmidon used more for gas mine than anything else. I hate saying that. I've had one time in the past 3 months where someone has actually said, man, does anyone have Galante Cruisers 5? And that's because we would have liked the Lachesis. That's the only time I could remember that we actually needed it. That being said, Proteuses do furious amounts of terrifying damage.
Yeah, I think these guys are being a bit harsh on Galente. Wormholes is probably the place where Galente are the best at what they do. The fact of being, short-range, face-melting DPS. Because of the layout of Wormholes, the fact that you're fighting on something means that you're going to be in the enemy's face, and a Proteus, a Vindicator, a Demos, all those sorts of face-melting blaster ships are really at home with what they do in Wormholes. I think the reason that we don't see a lot of Galente is because they don't have that great use in PvE, so a lot of people tend to steer away from that, or to only do Galente as a cross-train once they've got a base of, say, either Kaldari or Amar or something like that with better damage projection for PvE type stuff. But Galente is perfectly viable, and bringing in a Vindicator or a Proteus to a fight can sometimes bring in the DPS of 2 Lokis. And, for punching above your weight, there's no better ship.
Well, it seems we've run out of questions, and the class has gone over its time slot, so I guess we'll wrap this up and have a good day, I guess. If you have any last questions, please ask right now. Otherwise, this class will be finished, and everybody have a good day.
I hope you guys all enjoyed the class and hope you all learned a lot. The thread for the current apprenticeship that will be going on in August is up on the uni forums in the work thread. We also have a thread for general recruitment with information about that. If you want, come to the TRECI public channel. It's just TRECI, all caps, and say hi and have a chat with us if you want to learn more. The uni has some really great classes on wormhole mechanics if you want to learn some more about how wormholes work. And that's all I can think of for the moment, so thank you very much.